Hello and welcome to Simply Sacred, a loving gaze at the inner world in a modern society. I'm here with Chad Fournier. He is a breath work specialist, but he has a special niche with breath work that I've noticed that I've never heard of before. So I'm really curious to find more out about that, but also men's mental wellness and strategies for us to reconnect to ourselves in a meaningful way, in a way that kind of captivates a new story here, not just in our province, in our country, but beyond. And I think a lot of people are craving that authenticity, and it is time to remember that in a new way. But I hope that this day together, we can have some juicy conversation, dive into what breathwork does, dive into Chad's story, and some more. So, welcome, Chad.
Very excited to be here. Yes, a never-ending puzzle that we have to piece together when it comes to life, when we have to overcome even our inner dialogue that sometimes comes from sources outside of us, and reaching those levels and uncovering those layers to find out who we are, maybe even why we're here, and what it is that our mission that we would like to complete in this short, finite time that we do have on this earth.
You're right, it is short in the big scheme of things. Hey, so you sound like a deep person. You're deep and philosophical. And do you think the breath work helped you get that deep?
Absolutely. That's how I began to scratch the surface. In 2016, actually, I took a trip to, or sorry, it was 2017. I took a trip to Bali, Indonesia at the start of the year. And this was, I'll say, the start of a very transformational time in my life. 2016 is when I hit my crash. I'll call it a rock bottom. Everyone's definition of a rock bottom experience, it comes in different waves. And so I took that trip, and that was the very first time that I had discovered yoga. I discovered breath work. I discovered this this entirely different definition of what wellness actually is. Leading up to that time, I was always focused on the physical body and having this belief system that you keep yourself in shape, everything else is just going to flourish. But there is so much more to our being. And once a person begins to scratch the surface and uncover those layers, it becomes a very addicting journey, and it's a never-ending process that I hope to inspire others to begin that journey or continue, even though it can come with its challenges.
Wow. So I'll love to dive into little pieces of your story more. But first, can I ask, what is breath work and what specifically is sonic breath work?
Breath work is, so if we go break it down to just how we're biomechanically wired to breathe. So throughout life, we come across micro stresses that create tension throughout the body. So your body can actually forget how it's supposed to breathe. Just natural expansion of the diaphragm, in and out of the nose. And 90% of the time, we want to find ourselves in a rest and digest state. And so as those micro stresses pile up and our basic needs are met, but now we have all these external stresses, our body goes into fight or flight or into survival and releases adrenaline, cortisol. But when we decide that we're going to focus on our breath and consciously breathe deep into our belly and with full expansion of that diaphragm, our body begins to feel a lot more safe. So there's just teaching or reteaching your body how to breathe. And in yoga or in Eastern practices that have been around for thousands of years, they have this system where you focus solely on your breath. And if that's where all of your attention goes, everything outside of your being just dissipates. And wherever our attention goes, that's where our energy flows. A person doesn't feel their left ear unless they think about their left ear. And so there's that kind of breath work, which is just simply great, gathering your attention and placing your focus in one moment of time and space, and that's on your body. And then there's dynamic breath work, which is designed, it can be used for athletes, it can be used to get you excited for your day. And that's just controlled hyperventilated breathing and incorporating some holds and actually starving your body of oxygen for an extended period of time. And this helps boost immunity. If I'm holding my breath, it's like you're underwater, you come outside into the surface and you're gasping for air and your body's just so relieved. But if we intentionally do that and intentionally place our body under that stress, it releases all the soldiers, all the things that are going to fight everything that is bad for you. So placing our body under intentional stress, it also helps us to deal with those micro stresses of life. And I'm a big believer of always intentionally placing your body under stress, whether it is through physical activity, whether it is through breath work, just to give yourself the basis to deal with everything else that comes in life. And there's been plenty of studies that, especially the Framingham study, specifically out of Framingham University, it's been around since the 1940s. And in 1980, they took about 5,000 test subjects. And over a couple decades, they tested them. And their major link to longevity was not physical activity, it was not diet, which are two very important aspects of our well-being, but it was actually lung capacity per pound of body weight. So a lot of breath work actually helps us utilize the entire capacity of our lungs. Generally, people are walking around and only utilizing about 25%, when the fact is that the major exchange of oxygen and CO2 takes place in the bottom third of our lungs. So if we're only using the top 30% naturally, because of, again, we're creating that tightness around around the diaphragm or around the belly, instead of actually just letting things flow naturally, we are not even giving ourselves a fighting chance to regulate our nervous system. And then there is one of the mothers of all breathwork, which is sonic neural breathwork, who was taught to by one of my mentors, Ben Holt, who is the founder of Awakened Breath. And this is a completely different dynamic and experience, because throughout life, every experience that we have is stored in our subconscious. And there's been plenty of research and dialed in that the body is actually our subconscious mind. That's where everything is stored. If someone experiences anything trauma related, from something super heinous all the way down to if they go through a tough breakup or they lose a family, that's considered trauma as well. And our natural reactions are going to be stored into our body, and we might close up. And in trauma, or something that no human should actually experience, our body just prepares itself to shut down, to die more than anything. And so sonic neural breathwork is a very intensive practice that over oxygenates the body through intensive breathing and through the right guidance and through trance music. And so when we're literally changing the chemistry of our body, and through that intensive breathing, we are separating the body from the thinking mind, giving the body its innate healing power back as soon as we take out the conscious mind. So it can be a transcendental experience for a lot of people. And during those practices, people have things come up that maybe they have been putting on the shelf for years, whether they know it or whether they do not. And during these practices, people have profound experience. Personally, I've found a way. I've been involved, or sorry, I've been practiced on as well when it is sonic neural, and it can actually be a very euphoric experience too, where a person just releases all of these happy emotions that are stored within their body that they have been suppressing for years because they've been so caught up in point A to point B living throughout their life. So it's the dynamics and the limits of what can happen during that specific practice are limitless. And when you get really good at breath work, you can learn to manipulate that experience and direct it towards anything that you would desire to let go of in life, or that you would like to bring into your existence.
I felt myself breathing deeper as you're talking, and I'm sure every listener is as well. Right? As soon as you talk about it, you want to become conscious and aware. Oh, I am shallow breathing. I want to breathe deeper.
That's right.
And so this is really curious. There are so many points that are very curious to me to explore deeper with you. One of them being what you said about stored processed emotions that are positive. We so often talk about stored emotions or traumas that are going to surface that are negative, but you're saying positive experiences and memories that haven't been processed can also be stored in the body or in the mind that will also release. Is that what?
Absolutely.
Wow, I never thought
Yeah.
of that.
And again, when when we hear the word suppression, generally we think, oh, we're just suppressing our emotions and we're holding on to this negativity and it's building. But if we are living a life where maybe we are feeling sad, we're feeling depressed, and we're expressing that, but deep down, what do we all want? Maybe we want the freedom of ourselves. Maybe we want love. Maybe we want abundance. Maybe we want prosperity. And all of that, it can be tapped into and it is available to us. It's in some sense, as great Bob Proctor used to say, it's our birthright to be abundant. It's our birthright to be happy. It's our birthright to experience unlimited love from the universe, from the earth, from your environment, and from the people around you.
I think about our standardized school system, and children are so curious and playful. We're hardwired to always be curious and playful, and that it's not like that should stop. But in a standardized school system, if a child comes in quite joyous, if a child comes in quite free and creative and bursting almost like the pleasure of life, I get to see my friends today. Yay, look at that new thing that's in the classroom. Yay. But they need to muffle that. They're told to muffle it and sit in their desk. They're muffling and they could be just storing it somewhere. And it's then suppressed for many years and decades even in order to be that conformed aspect that's taught, right? That muscle memory that's imprinted. And not to say that's wrong to need regulation in a classroom, but I don't think it's necessarily natural either.
No, and you bring up an interesting point because I think there's a lot of things within that system that do need to be adjusted. Also, as we go into the working environment, maybe in a school, we're taught to solve all of these problems by ourselves. Even if we're sitting there working on a test or working on an assignment, you sit there and you figure it out. Whether maybe you have no idea what you're doing, that can be very frustrating for some students, and maybe even create a bad relationship with schooling or with education that they're going to bring into their adult life. Whereas if you are in the working environment, if I'm sitting there, I'm stumped. The first thing that I'm doing is calling a supervisor, calling a colleague that I know has more experience with this challenge that I'm having so we can work through this together. And as far as the freedom and the expression and the creativity, a lot of that does come from within if we're given that capacity to do.
So you talked about your trip and you
Yeah.
talked about how things opened up for you. Can you describe in detail what that was like, what your paradigm was before, what led you to want to go on the trip, and then how that arose and that blossomed and what exactly blossomed within you?
So when so basically leading up to the point when I booked the trip, I look back into my mid-teens and into my late teens and even into my early 20s, and there was habits of being this image or being this person, this living in these societal expectations of what being a man is. We go to work. Oh, what do we do on the weekends? We drink hard. We play with the friends, and we have women all over the place, whatever that looks like. And there was a lot of things that just weren't sustainable for an extended period of time, and nor were they healthy. And it led to a lot of unhealthy relationships. It led to a lot of putting myself into an environment that it all around it created challenging a challenging system because being in that social environment or it made it more of a challenge to um, create sustainability in my professional life and as well as relationships in my personal life. So when everything came crashing down, I actually got some advice from some friends who I hadn't seen in quite a while, and some family members where they're like, "Hey, it's time to make a change." And I just agreed with them and I said, "Thank you for noticing." And right then and there, I made a choice that I was going to change the trajectory of my life. So I booked this trip, and it was one of those things where I was lying in bed and all of a sudden it just started ringing in my ear. And this was, I'll say, my first connection with my inner self. And it was saying, book a trip. I said, okay. And I was like, okay, I'm going to play with
You
this.
felt that? Where did you
I,
feel that?
I heard it in my ear. I heard it in my ear, book a trip. So then I'm sitting there, okay, where am I going? And I said, Bali, Indonesia came to mind. And I had never, ever, I'd seen pictures of Bali or whatever. I heard people talk about it, but it was never crossed my plate. So I booked it. I booked it the next morning as I woke up. And when I got off the plane, I knew I was heading in. I needed a break from everything that was known to me. So I knew going like when I got off the plane, I saw the glow in the country. I saw the glow in the people. I saw nothing but love and happiness. And it was I'll say the first time that I had truly went on a trip where I was a part of a different culture and a part of something rather than just jumping away and running away from life for a week. I went there and I was part of the culture for a couple weeks. And it was probably the first time where I felt that there was a higher source than the information that I was led to believe that I am the sole creator of everything that is in my existence. It was the first time that I felt that I confided with I'll say my higher power, higher self, or felt the presence of something outside of just me.
So do you think that's part of because you were immersed in the culture there and that's the socio-cultural environment that is there and that you were experienced and you saw the joy in them and you felt it, but you also felt that spiritual connection that they have?
I was also it's outside of what I felt, I was also seeing things differently. I was seeing the colors more vibrant. It was almost like I was seeing different energy and different shades of light and tapping into frequency. And then all of a sudden, the people that I started to immerse myself with on that trip were just had this different sparkle, and they were there for somewhat of the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I met a great crew of people that was there. They were studying yoga. I met a great crew of people that were there and they were practicing breath work, and I spent a ton of time with them that month that I was there. And it's funny, I went there with zero intention to engage in even the party scene, and without even trying or without even expressing that, all of those people that were in my social circle while I was there, they were all doing the same thing.
And that prana that you experienced, had you experienced that ever before?
Never. And it was during my very first yoga session that I realized that in the first X amount of years of my life, I hadn't taken a proper breath. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what conscious breathing was. And that was my eye opener that there is much more to our physical wellness, or sorry, our optimal wellness than physical wellness. And it just opened up this entirely new curiosity. I knew that the work was just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Once that opened up, the work I was just opening up this door and became very curious. And throughout, from that time, fast forward to now, there's been a lot of ups and downs for the fact that you start questioning everything that was once learned or once known, and you start uncovering these doors. And you go down this rabbit hole and you can find yourself in a very challenging space by even doing the questioning, but that's part of the work.
Mm-hmm.
The universe wants you to experience some loneliness. The universe wants to test you and challenge you to see that if you are truly capable of sustaining these changes that you vow to make. And it does that in multiple ways. And it's never ending. It's just a never ending curiosity puzzle and unraveling all of the layers of who we are. When we get to a certain end goal of something that we would like to achieve, then there might be a purpose, another purpose right on the other side of that. And so we keep going. That's part of our natural evolution, for lack of better words.
Your curiosity opened up that experience because you asked the right question. So what core within you made you believe in the work you do? As you stated, you had the previous lifestyle, you saw how disconnected it was. You saw that there was a lifestyle that is about connection that is much more vital. But what is the core root of why you want to do this work and offer it to other people? Do you see human suffering around you? Do you see people and empathize with them that they're disconnected or that they're struggling in that disconnection? What is your core cause?
I've seen the difference that it's made in my own life. I do see people that are going through some challenges and are masking it in different ways. we have this work culture, this whole hustle culture, we'll call it. And working hard is very important. It's a part of creating the life that you want for yourself, for your families. But there are also a lot of people that I'll say it work is a defense mechanism.
Mm,
So the more that they believe that they are doing, the more impacted and also the better that they might feel because
mm,
they are busier, have this schedule. But the truth of the matter is, if a person isn't well on the inside, then nothing external is going to make them happy. And I've been part of that where I was working as a power engineer, and then on my days off, I had this drywalling business. So I would work, and I'd come back and I'd work, and that was all part of my great crash. Just keeping busy and ignoring yourself and ignoring your feelings and ignoring your emotions in order to fill this void or to hold this picture, to hold this image is not the answer to anybody's happiness for that matter. And
do you
when
think
it
that's
comes,
rooted in self-worth? So when you say people are coping, so they need to work a lot, is that because there's the self-worth you think is defined around the ability to work and produce?
there's that. I also see, I've seen and have met some people who are doing work to say help people that were once in their position or whatever it is. So they see the hurt in others' eyes and they're making room or time to attempt to help a certain group of people or a certain demographic. But it's simply because of maybe it's because of the infidelities that they've experienced in their own life. Also, I have when it comes to men especially, there's this image of the man needs to be the breadwinner, and the man has to always have this working, this rough, this tough attitude. When it comes time to protect, when push comes to shove, sure, there's that demeanor that has to be within, but to operate from those parameters 100% of the time, it's simply not sustainable. There's other things you need that do need tending to.
Yeah, it's like the balance of the yin and the yang. Like the testosterone is likely a hormone that is conducive to being that protective male, right? And that driven male. That hormones do drive so much of human behavior, right? But then that, like you said, that counterbalance. And so that links back to what you're talking about with the sonic breath work, and balancing any kind of suppressed emotions, because men also have suppressed emotions that are impacting them every single day, that can lead to disease, that can lead to mental health, that can lead to addictions. And is it a cultural shift you think that's needed for men? What is it that men need, you think?
I think that men need an outlet.
Hmm.
Men and sometimes I think that gets confused with their partner. Like your partner is not necessarily the outlet, right?
Okay.
And that's when things start to get, I'll say, more complicated. And I'm not a relationships expert by any means, but when there's certain challenges that a man is going through, he needs a friend or he needs friends or he needs a group of people in order to express those and to understand. Also, I think a lot of that is what are the action steps? A lot of men that I've talked to, they just don't know what the next action step is, or and when it and you can only, I'll say, navigate that so much yourself. There's always somebody who has the answer. And if a person isn't doing the work, they're not reading the books, they're not listening to audiobooks or podcasts that do have the educational or the foundational resource to become this, to step into their divine masculine, then it's when that things can start to deteriorate. If a man is truly living within his purpose, and that is the thing that is held in the forefront of his mind, then everything else should flourish. And sometimes the purpose is not necessarily the job. Sometimes the purpose may be to just be the best father, or to maybe it is a promotion at work, or it is to take care of their own physical well-being or their own mindset or their own to tap into something that's bigger than them, taps into spirituality. And when we hold resistance to anything that is possible, then we start to question and we start to feel that resistance of kind of our external. And if there is no outlet when it comes to a group of people, then I find that that's when most of the challenges do arise.
Did you personally always have self-awareness a bit, because when I hear you talk about even your story of knowing you needed to go, it seemed like you had a level of self-awareness already.
Yeah, I guess I was waiting, like I'd done a lot in my life. I was waiting for to hear something external or to give me that push. And I'd say during the darkest of times, I knew that things were not on the right path, and I could feel that,
Mm,
but I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to change my lifestyle overnight.
mm,
And we always hear these things of creating a habit takes X amount of time. It's potentially to make sure to make it a part of our daily routine or our daily life, or to the point where it's autonomic, it might take a while. But the moment that we decide, we make a decision, and that's when everything starts to change or starts to
mm,
shift.
mhm,
And I guess I just didn't make the decision until I heard from some good friends or from my family saying, "Hey, you know what? You're not just going to sit here and become a sad story. You got a lot of potential." And I guess I just needed to hear
mm,
those words. So I'd say even there's a lot of men in specific, maybe they're not around the right friend group to hear the right words. And a lot of it is just acquaintances that are continually heading down a system of self-sabotage, whether it's known or unknown, it may be felt. And that's when everything becomes a little bit too heavy, and the challenge just feels like too much to keep up with everything in life, from family to friends to societal expectations and the professional image as well.
So the power of love and brotherhood for you was a turning point, right? Because like you said, if men just endure and I'm okay, then people don't know. But you were wrapped all of a sudden in this like blanket of being seen. And we know that men in their mental health, like it, and men isolate more, men are way higher risk to isolation than women are. And I think that can correlate to the statistics we see in BC, where 75% of men that committed suicide in 2023, 75% of people were men, right? And how can we help to be more of brotherhood for men when, for me personally, I'm all about consent and boundaries. And so if someone's saying, no, I'm good, I'm not going to force past their wall. Like for me,
Mhm.
I'm about, and so how can we get it so we can send that love and we can be wanting to support people and say, hey, emotions are healthy and natural, and you are so worthy and you can cry. You are so worthy and you can take 3 months off work. That is still true. And so, how can we send that message on a larger scale so then the walls can come down? Then they can say, yes, actually, I will be willing to receive that love, that kindness, that support, that gentleness that their tough exterior is blocking. Because as long as that tough exterior keeps blocking, it's really hard, right, to move through that respectfully, right? Brotherhood. I know that men's sheds are really popular in BC and around the world, and there's been a lot more coming up here in northern BC. And I know that they've had really positive impact, but I think that there's so much room for other forms of brotherhoods as well. And like you said, when they need an outlet, and it's not to the family or the partner where that outlet will be received or found. Like if you want to go off in the forest and cut down a tree and get some like sacred anger out, or axe throwing, or some real stuff with brothers, like that is normalized to have those healthy rituals instead of, hey, let's go sit at a bar and drink. And even though that's the coping for now, because maybe that's where the conversation happens, maybe that's where that outlet happens. But what they're really seeking is that emotional connection of relatability and familiarity and that brotherhood that way. But I think we could create more cultural norms. And it's not really women, it's men to lead that. It's definitely men to lead that. And yeah, it's really nice to hear from someone who is aware and has that self-awareness. But I think the self-awareness piece is really a barrier, right? Like when you say men are action driven and they often think, what's the next step? If they don't have the competency or neural pathways to have that self-awareness, to know, hey, when I do this cycle, it started with this thought pattern, it started with this feeling, it started with this belief. If they don't have that metacognitive formation to have self-awareness, then it's a lot harder, right? Than for someone who does have self-awareness. How do you help to foster self-awareness for folks?
Assisting them in changing the inner dialogue as well. 90 some odd percent of the time, we are still going to be by ourselves, whether we have a family or we have a spouse. We're still alone with ourself in the space in between, and changing that inner dialogue. And for men, I think there's a lack of, I'll say, self-love, which for whatever reason, and that goes deeper than just telling yourself you love yourself or looking in the mirror and saying, it's, do you truly enjoy the voice that's inside of your head?
I love that you're talking about self-love. What are some basic practices people could do for self-love if they're just starting, they're hearing you and they're going, okay, I want to see if I feel different if I try some new things?
You mentioned it on metacognition, and that's first becoming aware of your thoughts and understanding the origin of them. First, I think it is important to understand why we do feel a certain way, why we do operate, and then create that awareness and that curiosity of, to the point that every time that you take a drink of water, you're doing everything with intention. Every movement you have is with intention and understanding. And it goes deeper and deeper, and keep asking yourself the question of, why do I feel that way? Why do I act that way? Why do I tense up when I have to speak in public? And then when we start to ask those questions, then I guess for myself, anyway, I'm speaking on this one, I'm speaking from personal experience. It's, if there is no underlying reason that a person should feel that way outside of an experience that may have happened when we were 8 years old and when we were 17 years old, and we find ourselves in our mid 30s, then everything, also those walls and those barriers can be knocked down a lot easier. Now, it might take some action, it might take some awareness, but everything can become a little bit easier and begin to flourish for that matter.
So a self-love practice is really exploring who you are, and no matter what the cause of a distortion of thought or feeling, you just love yourself more.
And also, there's the physical aspect of this too, is that you should take care of your physical body. There's meditate person should participate in some sort of practice that is going to be able to calm their mind and in turn ripple down into their body. And I think also a lot of people need to understand too, if they are embarking down this journey, is that nothing is going to feel easy overnight. When it comes to breath work, when it comes to meditation, sometimes the idea is to just make a deal with yourself and that you're going to sit there until you are, like we talked about before, aware of your thoughts and understanding until you feel like a different person, whether it takes 10 minutes, whether it takes 20 minutes, or whether it takes 30 minutes. Just make that deal with yourself and you break that resistance of saying, oh, this doesn't work. I'm out of here kind of thing. And then it becomes almost a game or almost a process where, and then you start feeling better about yourself while you're with yourself. And sometimes that is just overcoming the resistance by sitting through an entire meditation, or getting yourself outside and walking that extra block or climbing that mountain physically to overcome, again, the resistance of going somewhere familiar and flicking on the TV and watching Netflix for 3 hours, starting to cut those little things in half and direct it to other activities, from physical, from emotional to spiritual, whatever that looks like. It doesn't always have to be, for me to self-love, doesn't have to be 2.5 hours at the gym, half an hour in the sauna and hike up a mountain. It can be simply as waking up in the morning and practicing gratitude for 5 minutes and doing 2 push-ups and walking around the block. That is how we start the magic, basically the magic of the momentum to want ourselves to feel better, to want ourselves to better yet, to allow ourselves to feel better and really come in tune with us.
So you're really representing the embodiment of healing and being on a healing journey. And we know the statistics with trauma and those who have experienced trauma, and that we assume that everyone has had trauma because the statistics are that reality. And I think that The first point is that ego identity formation, and particularly for men, to resist, I don't want to be some yoga guy. That ego identity formation of, I don't want to lay there. What am I even doing? And they judge themselves. Their internal dialogue goes, I don't want to become that. I don't want to be that. Even though that ability to actually have that depth and knowledge of self is strong, courageous, brave, and a warrior. And then the second point, I feel, is that if a person is laying there and say 20% of that window of time that maybe they had intention to sit through and try to do a meditation and try to be the observer of their thoughts and feelings and actually feel in their body, is that if an unprocessed trauma that someone's been running from forever, they're numbing from forever, they're overworking or watching TV or porn or shopping or drugs and alcohol or all the things that make them not want to lay there and feel, right? Doom scrolling, like all of those things, right? Like you're truly representing and embodying the solution to basically all of the social problems, the mental, emotional problems. You are literally talking about what is needed. But we know that so often that will come up, where something will come up and a sensation will come up that's unfamiliar, or the reason they've been running for years, maybe decades. And so do they need to have trained professionals? Can it be that simple as those self-love practices? Do they need trained professionals before they start the journey or during that journey in case they have something major come up? Or do you think that people can be inspired to move through it regardless, through journaling about what happened, experiencing about what happened, go hug and love somebody and just say, hey, I need you to sit with me? We can, as a community, do that for each other, I think. But where do we tie in that aspect of really important trauma-informed realities of this work? And how do you show that within your spaces you create?
So I think all of the above, that a person should seek somebody who is professional that can help lead and guide. Also, that in that self work it through journaling and sitting through unknown, unfamiliar practices or unfamiliar ways is also very important because it doesn't have to be done alone. And I think a lot of people struggle with that aspect too. It's, wow, I already don't like hanging out with myself that much, and then now I got to do all these work, which isn't the case. There's groups, there's professionals, and myself. I have attended a program years ago, and that's where some of my best learnings and some of my best curiosities came through while working with professionals on the psychological aspect. And it just, again, for me, I found it fascinating because that was where I'm like, oh man, the mind is just this never ending fascination, and it's just never ending information. And to be able to sit there with professionals and just rattle questions off to them, bang, I enjoyed it. And we might surprise ourselves as well that throughout, or how much fun or how entertaining that healing practices can actually be. And depending on everyone's experiences are completely different. So there's some individuals that are going to need something that's more hands-on, that's something that's more supervisional or whatever that looks like, or more accountability. Some people are already in a very good face or space or good image, but there's just something lacking, something inside. And they might not be depressed about it, they might not be unhappy about it. They just know that there's more. And for myself, I always, when I work with people, there's always intention setting. Like, and that's how part of how you qualify who you're going to work with. What's the intention behind it, and what are you looking to achieve through this? Because you can take somebody through a breathwork practice, or you can take somebody through a mindset exercise, but if there's no action, or if they're looking for that 30-minute session or that 40-minute session to be the answer to all of their challenges, that's not going to work. There is so much work outside of it that has to happen and continually happen for to see any sort of progress in anyone's life. You don't see any professional athlete that just takes the summer off and then thinks they're going to go into their training camp in the fall and dominate. It's a day in and it's a day out practice. And when we start to look at our life in that way, then again, things become And also the resources will always pop up. We're in a world of information that if you truly want to learn something on your own, there is so much free information through some good Instagram accounts or some good YouTube accounts for that matter, or excellent podcasts out there that can continually spark your curiosity and get here. There's a podcast right here that can spark all this curiosity, and it's all readily available and a person just has to want to do the work. But I also, again, I do say check that box too. If there is a professional that is within arm's reach, and nowadays, if we can have conversations from anywhere in the world and
Mhm.
it's always accessible to some extent. And there are situations where that might not be the case. But for the most part, it's going to come down to the person wanting to do the work and keeping themselves educated or getting educated and continually staying curious and knowing that the information or the practice is not going to be the answer. It's about grabbing bits and pieces or nuggets from those sessions and actually beginning to integrate them into their own life, because to know something and not do it, you might as well not even know it to some extent.
Yeah, it's every day like brushing your teeth. It becomes these rituals that formulate over time, and the neural pathways that fire together, wire together, right? You really piqued my curiosity of just nailing this question right pinpointed. Why would a man want to be a healed, quote unquote, healed man? Like you said, if they don't want to, they won't. But there's so much information. If they truly value and intend that, then they will seek and find those resources.
Because you can, once you're healing, you've done the work, you can step into your dharma or your highest self and create this world around you that it you can create this world around you that is almost unrecognizable from a certain space. And to step into every day and see different light or see different interactions, it comes from doing that, basically doing that work within and focusing on a soul's purpose, which can change at times as well. But if you wake up every day with a mission, or if with, again, with a purpose, and there's something to uncover, then you hit a certain level. And as you begin to level up, everything, and you begin to, it's just a continual leveling up. And when a man is truly in his divine, everything else will just take care of him, of itself, including their family, including their professional life, including their social life, will all just begin to flourish if there is truly a solid foundation inside. There's a good portion of people that when they hear the word spirituality or they hear the word God, that they are off put by it because it might not be something that they grew up around or something that they have had no curiosity from. But to understand, to just sit with that, how you feel, even to one extent, how you feel is going to affect the interactions around you, no matter what that looks like. And if you're truly, you can't mask to yourself what's going on inside. You can't hide that. You can maybe hide it to friends and hide it to family and hide it to coworkers, and to strangers, but you cannot deny yourself of what's going on internally. So if you're not a spiritual person and you focus solely on what's inside of you, then and you find a space where you do feel more energetic or you do feel like your frequency or vibration has raised, and focus solely on that and understanding of thoughts that are coming through and beginning to shift and pivot all of that. And if the word, like I said, if spirituality is not your thing, and you're looking for something outside of yourself that maybe have a higher power, without the sun, theoretically, there's no life on earth. If there's something outside of you that is more powerful, or that you believe that there is something outside of you, but you don't want to exercise any of those practices, it's a matter of just connecting with something outside and really honing in on raising your vibration internally and experimenting with it.
Like when I think about what 75% of 639 power engineer, you're probably better at math than me, but it's large. One person is too many, right? One person
Totally.
dying is too many, but that is a huge number. And as a society, we should be all weeping for those men that have lost their lives and think about their stories and think about why did they feel so disconnected from love from other humans and feel that hopeless to end their life. And those are the statistics that we know the coroners confounded as suicide, but there would be many more. It's really worth it to dedicate a lot of time towards men's mental health. And I know that you're doing that.
And as I always I talk about and I say all the time, it's like if something that is quote unquote impossible, it's like, why not just believe that it's possible and that it's inevitable to come true? Whatever that, truthfully, what do we have to lose by
Mhm.
believing in the impossible? If we sit here and we talk about and we say one day we'd like to see that number of men's suicide in BC down to zero, it's like, what do we have to lose by thinking that way? We got absolutely nothing to lose by believing that's possible and feeling that's possible by creating simple conversations like this and providing different outlets for people to overcome the barriers and the challenges of life.
And how do you think that the general mainstream culture, how do you think that the majority of men are taught to view and treat women?
This, when you look at society in general, there's what do men and women do? They get together, they have kids, and they keep our species going. There's also there might be an to some extent an objectified outlook on this, which is completely backwards. And there's the different you talked about it earlier with there's also that side of addiction, of sex addiction, of porn addiction that men are experiencing right now. So it also changes how maybe they do view women and also past experiences, past relationships. If someone has a bad experience, they might think, oh, all women are this, all women are that, and placing that as like a stereotype for an entire gender. And for myself and my own experience, after truly asking these real questions, it's like I find women to be very intuitive, very creative, very, to some sense, telepathic, and when they're truly stepping into their divine feminine, but also men who are of, well, we'll call it not confused, but of culture of male and tough and alpha. It's like what they truly don't understand is there is a feminine essence within them that also does need nurturing and also does need touching. Now, to step in to be dominant on one side or another is just how we'll balance ourselves biomechanically. But to understand that a lot of those features and a lot of those that energy is also needed for you to tap into your own creativity or your own authenticity, your own artistic ability, and to be able to release that, whether it is through writing, whether it's through singing, dancing, or whether it's through physical activity or whatever that looks like, to step completely into your dharma, that a lot of those energies are might be sitting dormant, which is also what sonic neural may assist in helping release that and getting a person in tune and in touch with those. I have talked to people a lot about that kind of thing out there, and people are open and receptive to it because it's an interesting topic. So what do you mean I'm not breathing properly?
Yeah,
Funny how that works, right? It's, yes, I'm surviving. It's, yes, exactly. You're surviving.
you're not
And
thriving.
that's right. So
And it's cool though, because the practice that you do is very experiential. People can see very black and white experientially how they felt before and how they're now feeling after. So they get the effects.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's measurable and it's tangible, and the results, I guess, do speak for themselves. And sometimes it's a sensory experience. They just
Mhm.
feel different. They feel better in their body. It's not necessarily anything. They don't start seeing spaceships or anything. They just go they just walk away feeling better. And
Yeah.
the thing with the breath is the breath will always it'll give you what you need, not necessarily what you want. I've had
Mhm.
people in sessions where 15 minutes in, they fall asleep, and which is fine, that's what your body needed at that time. And then the music just takes them to a different space and they wake up thinking that they didn't get what they needed out of it. So, no, you got exactly
Yeah.
what you needed out of it.
Yeah.
And I think life just has has an interesting sense of humor and shows us that sometimes in the most unique ways.
Mhm. So yeah, because if their sympathetic nervous system is always on and they're go, and they finally get this space where it can turn off, and it's literally going to turn off and go to that parasympathetic response, their body's going to go, oh, and they actually get to rest and receive and just be, which can be very foreign for folks that are driven that way.
Totally. There's people that are continually in discomfort and they feel comfortable in that state. So then all of a sudden their body shifts to this state of rest and digest or relaxation. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they want to
Mhm.
jump back into that old self or what is familiar. And they
Yeah.
don't even allow themselves. And I've talked to people a lot where they come out of it, they're saying like, man, I'm so confused. And I'm like, be excited
Mhm.
because that means you've done the work and something new is on the horizon, or you simply just disrupted old patterns. And your
Mhm.
body's, who is this? What is going on here in this vessel?
Yeah.
And we're the only, like, we are the only species on Earth that taxes ourselves day in and day out over the petty interactions. Like a
Mhm.
gazelle goes and runs from a lion, and then 10 minutes later, it forgets that the lion was there and it just goes back to its routine because it has to conserve its energy
Mhm.
for the next interaction to survive. All it knows is this thing's out to get it, and it
Yeah.
is prey to some extent, but it's also goes about its daily life and it's able to turn it on and off. And humans were blessed with that thing called the neocortex or our conscious or our thinking mind. And we cannot always knock it off, or it takes work to a space that we can actually dial it back to a
Yeah.
more productive thought or inner dialogue.
And those animals can shutter out trauma once they're attacked. They just shutter it out somatically. But when do we give ourselves grace to go, oh, that thing that happened that was really shocking, I'm just going to go and get it out of me. No, I love all of this conversation. When I think about the generational healing for men, I think about the grandpas in what they went through. What was their trauma? Passing core beliefs down to their sons and then to their grandsons, and how far back that went, what they went through to teach boys in their families to be scared of feeling and being vulnerable.
Totally.
Mm.
And yeah, I think everyone's experienced that too, whether no matter what your upbringing was. We see 3,000 advertisements a day and quick fix dopamine on our phone on what it is, and there is always something that you'll stumble across that places this ideal image of what a person is supposed to be, and some of that is based on who they are biologically, whatever their gender is. This is what you're supposed to look like, be like, and act like. And those are things that I think all of us as humans just need to overcome and begin to grasp that a lot of maybe how we feel is just not is it has just been brought onto you externally or through conditioning, whatever way you want to look at it, and finding that ability to overcome all of that and to some extent question everything,
Mhm.
question it, even from well-meaning people, because guess what? They went through the same thing within the matrix of life, whether it is parents, teachers, police officers, or people of power. So I'll get you to sit up straight, feet on the ground, eyes closed, and just notice how you are breathing naturally without any interruption or judgment. Just focus on your breath. I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, filling up the belly. 1, 2, 3, and sigh it out. Ah. Fill up the belly, chest, head in through your nose. Fill, hold at the top. Hold it. Hold it. Relax and sigh it out. I want you to continue breathing and just notice how you feel. I want you to focus on your heart and breathe into that space, that center of creation, that center of intelligence. And just notice a green flame begin to spark around your heart as you breathe into it. Feel the warmth as it spreads into your body and you breathe in and out of your nose. Now I want you to place your attention on your throat, where we send the sound frequency into the earth, into our surroundings. And just breathe in and out of your nose into your throat. And that flame begins to spread, connecting those two energy centers. Now I want you to focus on the back of your head and the top of your head, the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Just breathe in and out of your nose into those spaces as you feel the flame begin to work its way up from your heart to your throat to the back of your head. Slow down the breathing. Now I want you to allow that to spread all the way down through your shoulders, through your arms, belly, all the way down to the base of your spine. Just let the flame build. And just notice the warmth and the stillness as you send a signal to your body that you're safe, relaxed, as you tap into complete nothingness. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Mm.
How do you feel?
Like I don't want to open my eyes.
And something like that's like kind of a relaxation technique that I use either prior to going into a session or when they start coming out of it. A lot of the practices are much more intensive breathing than that, but those are simple techniques and awareness that a person can use during meditation or to some extent while you're not, well, I shouldn't say while you're driving, but how you as you're just walking around in everyday life, you can bring those relaxations and those awarenesses to your energy centers and the systems of your body that do hold that power and just breathe into them to a point that you almost feel like you're bypassing the natural air passageway and you're breathing literally right into your heart and right into your brain and right into your throat or the base of your spine.
Well, thanks for coming on today. How can people find you if they're intrigued or they want to know more?
They can reach out to me on Instagram with Chad Fournier Official, or they can find me on my website, chadfournier.com. And yeah, I'm also on Facebook as well. So anywhere, any one of those spaces, let's just connect, have a conversation, and see where things can go from there. I always like a good conversation, worst case scenario.
Great. Thanks so much, Chad.
Thank you for having me.